Hello, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the networking break and you had enough time to connect and share your ideas and get inspired maybe. I would like to introduce the second panel that will be focused on smart cities, civic innovation and civic technology. Smart cities became like a very hot topic in the last couple of years. And we are very happy to have such a heterogeneous group on the stage coming from policymakers, technology companies, and innovation hubs. So I'm happy to welcome Alper Çugun, who is principal at Hubbub, a design studio, who will be moderating this session. Welcome. I can keep the one.
Okay. Thanks, Sharka. Thank you, everybody, for being here on this session. I'm Alper, like I was just introduced, and we're going to talk about these various topics of civic innovation and smart cities and try to keep it a bit more concrete, even though everybody here is at a very high level in this conversation. I think it will help if we figure out how to make it tangible for normal people out on the street. Can we have a quick round of everybody introducing themselves, and I think then we'll go a bit more into detail. And at the end of this panel, we'll have at least like 15 minutes of questions. So whatever you have, just bring it then, and we'll see what we can do with it.
Yeah,
I think I'll keep this.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Is it working? Yeah. So I'm Carina Lopes, and I come from Citymart. Citymart is a social impact organization. We have worked with 52 cities around the world, and we help cities to build their innovation capacity, create local jobs, and transform the way they deliver services at local level.
Hi, my name is Stefan. I'm CTO at allryder. We are doing public transit information systems to provide people with the best info on their city's transit system.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jarmo Eskelinen from Helsinki, Finland. I'm the CEO of Forum Virium Helsinki. We are the innovation unit of the city. It's a separate company, but owned by the city. We build collaboration in innovation and digital services between the city, the companies and the citizens, so the whole city community. We are quite active in the international domain as well. So one of the things I'm going to advocate in this is also better interoperability across cities globally. That's a day job. Then I also have another hat, and that's as the chairman of the European Network of Living Labs, which is the 300 plus member network of user-driven innovation actors across the globe.
Good afternoon. I'm Mathias Reddmann from the European Commission, DG Connect, so the ICT department of the European Commission. And together with the departments for energy and transport, we have launched the European Innovation Partnership Smart Cities, where we bring together industry, cities, civil society to work together on the various streams that we identified that are worth considering. For example, citizen focus, but also business models, open data, and so on. So I suppose we'll touch upon several of them during the discussion.
Okay, great. I just wanted to go a bit deeper into these because I think some of these are maybe a bit hard to grasp. Like with Carina, what is it that you guys really do to achieve the things that you just mentioned?
So we mostly use procurement as a strategic tool. We help cities to open their procurement processes by using problem-based procurement. What does that mean? It means that cities, instead of specifying the solution they are looking for a problem, and by this like provided technical specifications of how they want to solve that problem, they put out to the market a problem statement. We work on the development of that problem statement, and then the market, entrepreneurs, civic techs, hubs, citizens can apply and provide possible solutions to that problem.
Can you give an example, like how this works?
Yes. So, for example,
what problem set?
So, for example, Barcelona, we just had a project with them that is has had quite a lot of coverage. Barcelona Open Challenge. The city committed €1 million fund for 6 different problems. These problems varied from, for example, how to reduce bike thefts in a city, or how to reduce social isolation for elderly in a city. So there were 6 different problems, real problems from every day. And they put the problem statement out there, and they did a RFP, so a request for proposals. And they went through evaluation process. They chose 5 winners, and now with these 5 companies for each challenge, they will negotiate. They'll go through a negotiated procedure to identify the best possible solution for the city. So instead of going to say, telling the companies how they want the problem to be solved, they ask the companies, how can you help us solving this problem? So the outcomes is very different. And why is this important? Because what we have realized is that usually cities have 5 to 10% of the knowledge of the market. So there is very little knowledge about what's really going out there and the different business models to solve problems, common problems of the city.
Okay, interesting. And for like these 6 initiatives, they get like a piece of this 1 million to be able to solve a problem. That doesn't sound like a lot of money, but
no, it really depends. So, but it's not a lot of money. So this is a starting point. So for some of these, the money they'll get will be, I think, is between 50,000 to 150,000 euros each. It really depends of the scale of the problem, and most likely what they'll get, it's not finalized the final tender, but what most likely they'll get is a flexible contract. So it's a scalable contract. This is also a way to reduce risk when you're trying something very new in your city. So it's risk management. You try in a smaller scale, and if the results are what you expect, then within the contract allows you to scale up that to the city with more budget involved.
that sounds interesting. Do you have like one of these problems that are like submitted yet, or can we look them up somewhere?
Yes, of course. So if you Google Barcelona Open Challenge, you'll find website with the results. So the process is divided into parts. The first part, the submission was in May, and they finished evaluation in July. So the results are for the 5 winners for each challenge, and the final winner for each one will be announced at the end of December. So they are going through the legal procedures now.
Okay. I wanted to like have the same with Jarmo. Like, can you give us some examples of the things that you do and how that impacts people?
Maybe I'll grab, when I mentioned interoperability, I'll grab the key project in that area, which is City SDK, City Service Development Kit. It sounds technical, and in a way it is, but it links to communities. So what we do, or have done, it's now coming to the final stages of the first 3 years round of the project. What we've done, we have worked with 8 European cities, from Istanbul to Rome, Lisbon, Barcelona, Amsterdam, Manchester, Helsinki, and Lamia, in 3 areas. So in transport mobility, and tourism, and citizen feedback. And what we've done is to harmonize the API of the city system, so that when you build a good solution for transport of Helsinki, the same app will work for transport in Istanbul. Or if you have a good citizen feedback system for Amsterdam, the same solution with the new language version, of course, will work in Barcelona.
So you already solved the problem that was touched upon in the previous session?
It would be nice to say so. The fact is that API management is hellish task. So it's, I think, idea of SDK, like technology companies offer an SDK for developers. I think the idea of the City SDK is a healthy metaphor, but it's much more messy than a technology SDK. So I think harmonizing APIs is one way, but we also do need to standardize and harmonize actually city systems on a more fundamental level than only APIs. But it's one way to shortcut, yes, some of the challenges.
And has any of this like touched citizens yet, like on the street?
Oh, well, yes, there are compatible interfaces and compatible same services running. For example, say same feedback systems built on Open 311, a bit enriched Open 311 standard, are running now in Barcelona, Amsterdam, Helsinki. Same apps works in these cities.
Oh, okay. That's great to hear. And with this transit data, Stefan, are you looking at this stuff? Like you guys need this data, I guess, right?
As I said, as I wanted to say, we're doing the same on a different level. So we take, for Germany, for instance, we take all the APIs that the German cities, the operators of public transport provide to us, and we integrate them all in our framework, and then make them usable So this is actually something we would be very interested, of course, because this is a common problem. So we looked in the city SDK, for instance, for Istanbul, and we follow this very closely because this is basically what everybody needs that wants to build a scalable solution. Because you don't want to build an app that's just running in one city. That doesn't make that much sense.
So you're looking at it, but you're not going to wait for it, I guess, right?
So we haven't used it right now because our focus is mainly in Germany, and there is no, as far as I know, there's no German operator being part of this project.
No, but actually the Istanbul Transport Authority ABI endpoint is there, and they have 14.5 million potential users. So it might make sense to check it out.
Yeah, we checked it out. But we also found that it's missing one of the biggest, the biggest means of transport in Istanbul, which is the minibus Dolmuş system, which there is no data at all. This is also a very interesting challenge.
That's not like standardized by the government, but that they do run fixed routes mostly, right?
Yeah, so there is a structure. There is a very strong structure.
It's not as informal as like most other informal transit systems.
It looks like very informal if you look it from the outside, but it's very, very strict. But there's no data. It's analog. It's running analog. So for instance, it depends really much on the transport system you're looking at. If you look at the transport system like Berlin or Helsinki, it's highly automated. There is IT systems in the background that will do all the work, and the only thing that the authorities or the operators have to do is to just provide an interface to that data, and then all are fine. But there's also a lot of cities or emerging cities that don't have any IT infrastructure behind their transport system, especially for this cases.
Couldn't you crowdsource it to be digital?
This is one way to approach it.
Well, partially, like these Istanbul minibuses, they're called Dolmuş, which means they're full, and they usually go when they're full, some of them. So they have no fixed departure times, and they can also stop whenever you want. That's like one of the advantages of it. So the routes are usually fixed, I guess. But
yeah, the routes are fixed, and it's if you look at this is just an example of no data. Then there's a lot of example. There's different data, like in Istanbul. There's also there's a lot of operators of buses and trams and rail systems, as well as ferries. But they all provide their data, but there's no common API to use. This is a very similar to the problem we discussed in the panel before with VBB, where Mr. Pilz said, you can have an API as a service, so you can say I enter my A to B into this API and I get back a route, or you can get the data. And if you get the data, you have to do the whole logic and the whole algorithms around the data yourselves. And this is a big difference also. So data is not just data. So it could be a service as an API, but it could be also just raw data that somebody still has to aggregate and establish a service on top of.
Yeah, I think especially Istanbul might be a very difficult and interesting case for this problem.
Absolutely.
But to talk about this, for instance, this informal transit and the difficulties that governments have in dealing with this, to like actually standardize this, to take it to Mathias, how do you think this problem relates at the European level? Like there's the thing about the very high level governments that want to do things, and there's the thing that what actually happens on the ground and this disconnect. Well, what's your perspective on that, especially within, for instance, the smart cities?
Well, our role here is the sharing of best practices. So we bring together cities and industries to show what has worked in one city and how can this be included in another city. So and this in various areas. So in the area of transport, we have a working stream concentrating on that. But then there are other areas, for example, which are important for my department, which is related to civic works. So how do you plan have a more integrated approach to civic works that telecom utilities, transport utilities do the works at the same time, which demands huge changes also in the city administration. And there, for example, we want to look at where is this happening already? It's in the beginning all over Europe. There's a new directive out, and how can other cities be encouraged to follow that lead? And so for that we have a marketplace launched in October, and we will share these ideas and guidelines, handbooks on various topics within the next month. So we hope that in May we will have the first guidelines and handbooks out there to share these best practices.
Okay, share one of these best practice ideas right now, like.
Well, like I said, we just started this, so we're right at the beginning to collect this. So it's difficult to say what is the best practice there. We have several examples, and now we're still working in these working groups to put them on paper and make them presentable.
Okay.
You have like thousands of.
So for the moment, we have 370 commitments on the page with over 3,000 partners behind them. So it's quite a massive knowledge base already.
Okay. Just to take it a bit more general, I was just listening to the previous panel about open data and about many of the conversations we've had about this before. And what struck me is that it hasn't really moved forward a huge amount. I don't know what your perspective is on this, but
yeah, I think it's very so. Coming back to the transport example, it's very easy if you have data and you have a machine running the data to export it and put it somewhere. And transport systems are very high quality systems that need a lot of data and scattered data. But if you look at the regular authorities, how they work, they use Microsoft Word or Excel in different versions. For different years and put files on some drives somewhere, this is very hard to even access those data, and I think this is the problem. So you need an operating system for cities, it's I think the interfaces are a very big topic, but it's also what's behind that. What do they run? What systems do they run, and how do they optimize their processes?
So it turns out there isn't that much behind them.
I fear that a lot of data is not open because people are ashamed of them. So because they're not usable, or they're not complete, or they're worse than we ever expected.
Well, I talk regularly to lots of people who try to use this data, and they always say it's always a disappointment. Yeah. Like there's this huge repository, there's all this data, and what happens mostly is that the government then say, we've done something, look at this. And they're then hands off. So
and it's a bunch of PDFs or Excel sheets, yeah.
Or worse. But Jarmo?
It's clear that the first hype of open data is sort of behind us, and we are at the Gartner hype chart. We are at the downward slope, which doesn't mean that we should give up hope, because the reasons are quite clear. First of all, there has been a tendency to value quantity over quality. That creates these messy data sets or data repositories with lots of bad, poor data. So I think better clearinghouse processes. We've had a clearinghouse called Helsinki Region InfoShare for 4 years. It has lots of data, but it's also validated. So we made sure that when we put something out there, it's harmonized, it's licensed with a public CC license. You do not get some sort of a quality of service promise with the data. And that seems to be working, because people take data seriously if they build services on top of it. They want to be, it can't be sure that it's somebody's hobby to put it out if you build a business on it.
Because you wanted to talk about developer engagement, and I think if the data doesn't work, that's terrible for the developer engagement, because people get excited, then they go there, and it just doesn't work.
So
what are your perspectives on
the lack of the clearinghouse processes lack of clearinghouse models is one problem which I see across Europe, that data is published in a sloppy way, and the other is then that's a bigger issue which we can't solve instantly, which is the lack of interoperability across data, which we already touched. So we are working out with that now in Finland. We've started a project with 6 largest cities of Finland, and that's going to be a clearinghouse which covers these cities, and that will be compatible across cities. But it actually requires money, and it requires effort. So it doesn't happen, just.
Yeah.
You can start a catalog with 50,000 euros, but it won't be much of a catalog.
Well, I get that. But also for the developer engagement, how do you think that we can build more sustainable developer engagement? Maybe some of you, the others, also have a perspective on this, but I think we're sort of past the point of hackathons, right? Or, hackathons were fun. They did some stuff. It was visible, but what do we need to do now?
One sentence from me, because I have a mic, which is that we must take their business seriously. it's not they are. I mean, if we want to for it to move forward, we must understand that they try to build something out of it and respect that.
So, Stefan, do you think you're being taken seriously as a business?
I think we are, because we have business development people running around since 2 years and talking to our public transport operators. So they take us seriously. So, but it's really it's not that you just go somewhere and say give me your data. They will say why would you need the data? So I think the problem itself is that it's very hard to understand for operators or authorities. To understand what they get out of it, because for me, for instance, is the clear is for every startup, the operator of a public transport system, for instance, they should concentrate on their core business, and their core business is to run the system, and not building apps or building fancy applications out there. So they should concentrate on that. On the other side, I agree that their core business is as well not building an API and engage thousands of developers. Maybe their core business
isn't their core business also letting people know that the train is going from A to B? Because
so there is a little of a gray area there. So you could also say if they would just publish all their data, somebody else could do the aggregation and offer API services to everybody, for instance. And do that, or you could say they can do it on their own. But their core business is running the system, and the city's core business is like providing people with infrastructure, security, safety on this, and not maybe running a big website.
Jarmo?
I don't think we can or should blame any department singularly about not doing something. Or the challenge which we are talking about here is a common challenge for all cities, or most cities, and that's a challenge of horizontal leadership across different departments. If you have an operation which you would need like everywhere, few cities are very good at establishing those. I mean, like in this case, if it's up to each department to open the data, it's a tough job for them because they don't do that as their job. If there would be an operation in the city, a task force which goes through all the department and does it for them, it's totally doable, but few cities seem to be capable of launching those.
Well, they don't want this, or
I think it's just...
They just don't want it, because if they did want it, it wouldn't happen.
They think that they are stepping on somebody's toes or something, I don't know.
Can I? Sorry,
Yeah,
I just want
to talk
to
about procurement. You wanted to talk about procurement, and
I want to talk about cities.
Okay.
I think it's really important, and even with the first panel this morning, to think that sometimes it's not just a matter of the cities want or not want to do. It's about having the capacity to do it. One thing that we often forget is, when you go to these sessions, you'll have the manager from the department attending to the session, but actually the person that is going to open that data is a technician at the back office. And it's not that they don't want to open the data. It might be that they don't understand the big picture. They don't share your vision. And it's not their daily job. So education, engaging the right people in the conversation is really, really important. And that's one of the biggest challenges when we talk about open data.
Okay, and to go to the smart cities theme, which I think is also very interesting. I wanted to lead it in with saying how open data has been neglected for a long time, but smart cities seems to be about very much the same things, like responsive cities, efficiency, getting everybody access to data. I think it's sort of the same rhetoric that's playing with open data, but just with smart cities, it looks like there's a lot of excitement going on around it. There's all these big companies that jump in on it. So why all of a sudden is it a huge popular subject? Can you clarify that a bit?
I first wanted to come back to the discussion that was going on here about interoperability of data. So because there we also have a stream working on that. So we have on the one side one dealing with urban platforms. So because as was stated, the problem or an issue is that cities are obviously organized in departments, and this horizontal layer is somehow missing, and we want to tackle that by operating platforms, so urban platforms, where the specificities and criteria for the interoperability of data are set out there across all the departments of a city. And that's work that has started now, and there will also be then a full set of these criteria be given to the cities involved in the partnership. And then another topic here about open data, of course, there's also then the legal and the political aspects as security and data privacy, which we will also look upon, because I mean it's not just about opening data of utilities and the city to make apps. In the end, you would also need data from users to have a complete picture and to be able to develop real and complete appliances and tools. But to get these data, you have to build the framework so that users will voluntarily make their data available. And so that's another working stream that we will focus on.
But will this horizontal platform in the cities happen because of this smart cities push? Like, is that something we can hope for in Berlin, for instance? Because I live in Berlin. And we don't have much to hope for in the realm of digital services. Like, if it's not utterly broken, then you're sort of happy. But like, how can we move that forward?
Well, today cities are in global competition on the good side and on the bad side as well. But positively speaking, they are looking abroad what is happening. I mean, in their own country and in other countries. And when they see good examples and that are viable and offer good services, they will certainly follow. And I think that that's the case for Berlin as well, because they just presented this year their smart city strategy, and they want to be more engaged in this area.
One take on that, I'm a total optimist. I mean, it's the only way to be able to do this work without becoming crazy. Cities are very slow to change. It's something which it seems to be that we need to take it for granted. That's the case. So we just decided not to give up hope. And it's like a big, very, very big, oil tanker, and then you try to change the direction with this, 2 horsepower boat engine. And actually it does change, but it doesn't just show immediately. When it comes for the horizontal leadership or horizontal interoperability, I think the challenge really, there are two sets of challenges, and one is, yes, technical, there's lack of interoperability, but actually the harder one to tackle is the mandate to do it. I mean, if you create a horizontal layer, does somebody see it as a threat? Is his power being taken away from him in this topic? And in most cities, the answer is yes, so that you can go through most departments, but not all, or then you can go through only like a few departments, and everybody else says that, get out of my turf. So that's a challenge.
Okay, and to talk about this, the delivery of services to actual citizens doesn't seem to be a big priority in this. I think maybe, Carina, you can give some perspective on this from the procurement level, but cities start from policy, and then they outsource development somewhere, and then whatever comes out at the end of it should be good enough, but it usually isn't.
I wouldn't agree with that. What we've seen in the last few years is a big change, especially with the latest financial crisis, in different levels. First, we noticed that cities are more open to open their procurement. They are more focused on the quality of the services, the end services they are delivering to the citizens. They are becoming more accountable because also digital technologies allow, make them more accountable. People are more on their backs. But also, we've run over the last few years over 100 challenges, and what we've noticed is a strong transition from what was urban infrastructure and smart technologies challenges to social innovation challenges. And it doesn't mean that technology is not present, but is present in a different way. The main aim is the citizen, is to improve the lives of their local citizens. But what we have to keep in mind, as Jarmo said very well, is change is very slow in cities. Changing policy, changing the way you do things, changing we're talking about civil servants that probably have been doing the same job for 20 years. It's very difficult, this change and this transition. And it's not because of a lack of willingness, it's because these are very complex organizations divided in silos that usually don't communicate with each other, that have different independent policies. But we do see a willingness there. So we are very positive. And also is the only way to keep working and pushing the boundaries is believing that there is a change happening.
Do you see a willingness, like, do you see examples of people delivering actual services to citizens and asking them what they thought of them, like this feedback loop closing?
Yes, we see more and more cities asking for citizen engagement. So they want to know, they want citizens to participate, to tell what they think about the services they are receiving, what are their problems in their cities. Now, this is at small scale, but it's happening. So most cities are starting to create, you can say maybe it's not the best way, but, platforms where you can complain about services, where you can notify problems within the city. Of course, to get the level of service that you expect or the flexibility and is going to take some time, but willingness is definitely there. And we've seen that a lot in last couple of years with a lot of challenges about civic engagement in cities, in Spain, in UK, in Moscow. We're talking about, for example, the Russian government that will not usually think about as a transparent government. We also see with the challenges the city of Moscow is presenting us that there is a willingness to share information and to think more about the end user.
Okay.
Can I have a short take on that? Because
Sure.
that links also to, it's not only because of, I don't believe that there's any bad will if you launch a service and then you don't accept feedback. I think cities would like to do things that way, but it also linked to the way services are being procured and bought. So I mean the way digital services are being done now is very different from just a few years back. I mean, all the commercial companies, how we do things is in an iterative way. So we make a demo fast, put a minimum viable product out, start to tweak.
Really? I thought it was like huge contracts given to terrible big companies.
I'm not talking about. I mean, if we talk about sort of internet space, end user services.
Okay.
That's how things are done. Not talking about public
government space.
Not talking about public procurement here, but how good services are mostly done by companies now. It's that way.
Like,
but that's not
Stefan can
something.
give us a perspective
That's
on
not
that.
something which cities seem to be able to do, and that's partly because procurement ways and methods don't actually support iterative organic processes. They are currently how we read the European legislation. I don't want to go too deep there because we can spend a day discussing the challenges of that. But they support this kind of that you must define what you buy with a like 100, 200-page document, and then you get it, and then you launch it. And who launches a digital service that way nowadays? I mean, in the commercial space, it's an absurd idea that you launch a product and then you think that that's like a final product. That's not how things are done in that space, but that's how cities are partly forced to do it.
Well, Stefan, can you tell us how things are done? Like, how does user feedback, talking to actual users, impact and
everybody knows how things are done in the internet these days. So you build a minimal viral product and you push it out, and then you look what people say and do about it, and then you try to get it right. So and everybody knows how cities and governments and big companies do projects. So they do a big specification and then they build it for 2 years, and then they find out that nobody needs it. Or it doesn't work or something like that. So, but I think this is one of the major problems, I think, that we have, and this will not change so fast because the whole legislation and the organization and the whole framework is not built like that. Because the taxpayer would not be happy if you would just take his money and say, I don't know, maybe I do something tomorrow, something different. So then we might not be taxpayers anymore, but investors in the government, which is a nice idea, by the way.
we are, right?
We are, yeah, but we don't act like that. So, what I think, what was really nice about your approach is that if the government would publish the data and then let people do something with it and support them, the agile, implementation process of an innovative solution could happen outside the government or outside the authority. So the authority,
which is what you're doing right now. Right?
This was we do it in a private way because we're a private company. We do basically very much the same as you guys do, but if data is published to the outside, you can outsource many of these services. And I think it's very logical that we will come to this place. If you look now, for me, I'm a citizen of Berlin. If I look at the website of Berlin city government, and if you told me about this 15 years ago, I would say this would never happen. But now we have it. So basically, the city government in Berlin is in Web 1.0 now. And they will be in Web 2.0 soon. So it's a bit slower than maybe technology or private companies do, but they will be.
But what level of service do you think government itself should provide? Like, it's nice that they give out the data and leave it to the market, but is there like a base level that the government itself should provide?
There is a base level, of course. If I need a new passport, I don't want to talk to Amazon, you know. I want to talk to my city government. But for everything else, almost everything else, I would say there's outside safety, security, or stuff like that. That could be more or less outsourced. Why not? Okay. So there's the data is at the government, and the services are built somewhere.
Because I think there's an example which I'm tired of always like using the English examples. Like we open data, we always had the English examples that they are doing it so much better.
They do.
And now I've got some friends who work at the government digital service in London, where they totally changed the way services are delivered to citizens in an iterative web-based way, which seems to be possible in government, agile development. Also because doing this saves them a huge amount of money. So they can hire the best people in London to do the work, and they will still save money because the big companies would charge way more even than them. So why can this happen within government? Like having insourcing the development of web services? Have you seen this anywhere, or is that a trend that something that you would go for, Jarmo?
One way to get it done is to create better understanding within the government by embedding knowledge there. So we have been using the Code Fellow model. So we are part of the Code for Europe program, and we embedded hardcore nerds to the City of Helsinki Transport Authority and ICT department, which when when the department discussed with the big providers of proprietary solutions, who said that it's totally impossible to open that interface, they said no, it's not. I can just code a little snippet here and then it's open, and we managed to.
But did that change something really?
It did. So we, as one example, we managed to open the interface for the City of Helsinki decision-making system, which is 1.3 million documents a year in a structured format. That's now available as open data. And the most popular apps are, so that you can tap into all the decisions, you can search for it, you can do whatever with it. And what happened is that in quite a short period of time, some civic hackers did very good browser-based apps on it, and the city council is using now that now instead of the official interface for the system, because it's much easier to use. So and that was €0 for Helsinki. So, and that does wake up, sort of open up people's eyes that just a second, it's possible to do things in much more agile and lightweight way.
Because everybody here was talking about sharing best practices, and if there are these best practices like the GDS happening, why aren't they just like being adopted by government? That's like strange, isn't it? This is best practice. It's providing massively valuable service improvement for less money. So why wouldn't people? I think I'll give it to Mathias for a change. Like,
yeah.
Could this be a best practice you could like spread around Europe?
That's one sentence. Cities think that they are unique. Cities think that they are unique, and challenges can't be solved by anyone else. That's one of the reasons.
And as was said in the panel earlier, civic innovation depends very much on the local leadership, and in many ways it's an experiment. So people in the city government have to be willing to go down that path, and a few cities in Europe are ready, and others will wake up certainly. So it will take some time, but
you
we
will
are
do
now bringing more and more cities together, because what has happened in the past is that cities sat in one corner and the industry in the other, and with a partnership we try to bring them together, and it is a process, and we will shed light on these best practices. So we hope that early next year we will be able to present a few of them in many areas, and broaden the scope over time.
But if you bring them together with industry, how will you make sure that it doesn't become a thing only for big companies? Because they usually take off with the money, right?
So we call it the city needs-led approach, so that cities specify what their needs are, and if the cooperation on the marketplaces online, in webinars and online, so also SMEs and civil society can hook onto it and contribute and deliver services and their ideas there. So it's not only up to big companies that have the budget to travel to meetings in Brussels or all over the world, but this sharing and connecting will happen online.
Okay. If anybody has anything else to say, Carina, then I want to take it to questions.
Okay,
on
I
this
just like
topic.
to make two comments. One is going back to legislation and procurement, just very quickly. That actually is not legislation that is stopping us to change the way things are procured. We actually, the European law, the framework gives us tools already to procure services in a very different way. We have a competitive dialogue, we have negotiated procedure that allows a much more flexible way of contracting services and apply innovation to cities. But what is really important is leadership, and we always go back to the same. Not every city leader is prepared to take the risk. And we see that in many places, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's always the same cities' names that come up. And their role is very important. Cities like Berlin, London, Barcelona, it's very important that they take the lead and they show that it's possible, because then smaller cities will follow up, cities that are less prepared to take risks.
Okay. You want? Let's take it to question. We're running short on time.
One
anyway.
quick talking about smaller cities following. These smaller cities have the advantage that their departments are smaller, so that this integration, the problems that we talked about earlier, can be tackled much faster in smaller cities.
They're usually doing better anyway. Yeah. Okay. Questions from the audience. I think there's a bunch. First from the front.
Yes, hello. My name is Mathias. I'm working with the OECD, and I'm in the communications department and trying to make our data, our statistics available. It's a slightly different topic than the data a city would have, but I think there's overlap. And just want to share with you, we have developed two different models how we share the expertise in actually publishing the data across different organizations. And this is a sort of a mix between insourcing and outsourcing. And one of the models is simply that we have sort of a network of organizations who share a platform, but they all contribute to it with their own procurement rules. And then once they have the code developed, they publish it under MIT license. And I was wondering if this was not only also an option for cities. I mean, rather than getting services from companies, they could hire people to develop what their needs, what corresponds to their needs, and feed this into a network of open source software from which all the cities could benefit.
I think we've seen this with the city stack, or is that something a while back? But anything, an open source set of tools that cities can procure and then share with each other?
That's doable, but it's not yet reached a critical mass, but it will be totally doable. So I buy the idea for sure, yeah. And the challenge maybe is that the cities want to follow what happens with their thing exactly, and they in that process they maybe can't be totally sure that what happens. Do they see the actual benefit of their actual?
But this is how like big parts of the software industry work. You take an open source product, you make it a bit better, you adapt it to your need, and then you go on. Because this
cities
is a very, very successful model. I think cities can just do the same.
Because cities aren't that different, right? They all need GIS, they all need 301, 311, they need all the same things.
They all think they are very different.
But as I
They're
said,
like old couples before marriage counseling.
Yeah, they think they're all very...
They have unique problems.
They think they're all very special, and that's why they all, I think, in the Netherlands...
But why, if they're so special, why do they all need Excel and Word for that?
Yeah, that's a surprise.
They want to... Well, in the Netherlands, we used to talk with lots of municipalities, and they would feel they were special, and then somebody from Oracle would go there and say, like, oh, you're so special, let me sell you this super expensive database. And that's how it often goes.
We will 5 times before.
By the way, we will see...
Next question.
We will touch on... We will see... Because the history of public services in Europe has been to sell the same proprietary system for each and every municipality 1 million times, there will be a lot of friction to make a more open system there, because it's a market disruption.
Okay. Next question from the back there. Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
I'll be very quick. I'm sorry. This is again the UK thing. We have fixed all of this. We have a compliant procurement framework called G-Cloud, where it meets the Office of the Journal of the European Union standards. You can procure small companies, and then the open data published about the spend on that shows that departments save like 96% of their spend. These are not new problems. You just have to have a political will, and you have to have the lobbying to go beyond saying, here is open data, we want open data, to then turning around saying, why are you wasting my money? And everyone in this room needs to start doing that. Otherwise, it won't change.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm working in a company for so-called Eparticipation. And I'm sorry for the German words, but at the moment I don't know how to translate it, so I just use them. I wanted to give 2 examples of how we're working with bureaucratic people. One is called Bürgerhaushalt, which is what we did for Lichtenberg, which is one of the most famous examples of Bürgerhaushalt in Germany so far.
That would be citizen budget?
Yeah,
or?
sort of. Yeah. It's an online platform where people can tell which amount of money to use in their kits for what projects. And there's voting on it, they can comment. They can, of course, do all the social media sharing stuff and so on. The most work we did there was to tell the people in Lichtenberg from the commune, they would need at least 3 people moderating the whole process. So what I want to say is there's a lot of communication and translation needed. There's really a huge gap between what people do in the bureaucratic system and what the citizens want to understand what they're doing. So this is it's not only about the data, it's not only about apps, it's also about having people in this whole bureaucratic process that are on one hand able to know what they're doing and on the other hand able to tell their citizens what they're doing in the end. The second example, which I also want to state shortly, is for half of Schleswig-Holstein, we're doing the Bauleitplanung online service. So this is for the easy part, because it's just a bureaucratic process. You can use the bureaucratic naming, and you can sort of put the process in a software process, which is quite easy. But these days we're about to opening it for the public, which is called Öffentlichkeitsbeteiligung, meaning that this scene from the beginning of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, all the plans have to lay out somewhere, and they lay somewhere, but you can't reach it. So these days we're trying for Schleswig-Holstein to put the data that we already have on public online display, so people can just check where am I living, is there something going on, stuff like that. And the main problem in establishing this app surface on our already existing software piece is a translation problem, because how can we tell normal users from all kinds of citizens what is Geltungsbereich and what is Bebauungsplan, and what consequences does it have if they put their Stellungnahme online in the Bauleitplanung?
But the question, do you think that the stuff we discussed just now is a first step in closing that gap? Is the gap narrowing or is it widening?
I mean, I know that with my company we're doing, I think, a lot of work in that field and just like knowing about the problem. But I think it's not enough to talk about only data and apps. It's also about like getting change in that bureaucratic process to get the people talk to each other sort of again, because it seems to be like something running on its own somewhere, and nobody knows exactly what's really going on.
So I think the problem is basically that the process in the government is not made for participation. It's made for lawyers talking to office people that know the words and the meanings.
Well, I've just heard lots of examples here about best practices being shared and about implementation level stuff changing within government. But has the governance behind it changed? Have you seen examples of that, like actual strategic, real change?
So I think the topic is very much what civic innovation is. It's not just about the technology, because the technology will only empower this process, but it's really about changing the processes in the cities. And for that, you need leadership. And this participatory budgeting, I think, is just
Matthias,
the beginning.
Where's the leadership? We've heard the word leadership here several times, but where is the leadership?
It is very in the form of the mayor very often.
In
so
Berlin?
I'm not in Berlin,
like
but
in Berlin we don't have a leadership from the mayor.
Well, that's very political. I'm not going to comment on that.
Okay, but where is it? I think we're really looking for some leadership here.
So just to continue, so participatory budgeting can be the beginning. People express what their wishes and needs are and indicate where the budget should be spent on. Of course, then comes the political process of aligning these various needs, and some things will have to be dropped. But that's where then civic innovation comes in. How can citizens co-create services? How can spaces be used differently? For example, if they want more parks or better social cohesion in an area, citizens themselves can jump in and fill the gap that is in the public budget.
Do we have time for more questions? I think there's a question here.
Okay, I'm one of the civic hackers in this audience, so I'm working with the open data, and we touched on many of these topics. I really want to stress this feedback loop, because we are doing things with open data, and I often have the feeling that we are also in a silo. Nothing is going back to the places where the data comes from. And that would be very interesting to... Jarmo had one of these examples where this actually happens, and it's not happening often enough. And Julia from the previous panels told about this innovative approach of round tables. So I think there should be more communication.
But what are you making that isn't touching the source again? Like, can you give an example?
Oh, we have a lot of projects. One is what's it called? It's similar to what the woman over there is doing from Schleswig-Holstein, which is also what's the name? I'm not getting the name, but it's also about what people are, what the government is planning to build. And this is a project that's entirely voluntarily driven, where they parse, or they don't even parse, they take out the plans from the PDF and put it into this online system. And this is something that could be taken back from the city. They could say, "Oh, this is awesome. Let's support it, and let's collaborate with the Open Knowledge Lab in Berlin on this project."
Can I about it's regarding the why it seems that the government doesn't listen? I think it's good to understand how a public system works. Public system is very good at creating processes. That's what they do. They create processes. And processes are by nature one-way flows, because in the case of most public services, there is not a consumer choice in the end. So there's no possibility to opt out. So you don't have to care about two-way flow. So to prove that why they should have a two-way flow, there has to be, I think, one option is to show that if you have a two-way flow, your process becomes better. And that's something we are talking here. I think that's the point here. That in this realm, if you have a interactive process, your process becomes better, you get cost savings, and you have to prove that in the process. And the other option is that you have a process in which you create the choice in the end, and that's, for example, we are discussing that now in well-being in Finland, that for home healthcare, it can't be that the public service is the only service. There must be an option to walk out, in which case the service competes actually against private services, which creates competition, which creates more user interaction. So, but it's not evil by nature, it's sort of evil by design. Because if there's no choice or no proof of the value, the process doesn't become interactive by itself. About how to work for that topic, example from Helsinki is the Helsinki Loves Developers program, which is run by the city. So I mean, we do discuss all the time.
Helsinki loves developers.
Helsinki loves developers.
More cities could do that.
More cities should do that.
Yeah. Well, at least it sounds good. You know, it gives this vibe that like they actually love developers.
And they do.
Okay. Any more questions? From the.
Okay.
I think we're on time.
Sorry. This one comes also from the online streaming. So indeed, probably following a little bit that idea of like every city feels that they are unique. I mean, I think sometimes it's kind of easy to talk from the point of view of like cities with, I don't know, like even 5 million people. But I mean, how are you prepared to deal with cities like Mexico with 23 million or any other city in Brazil like Rio?
So the question is, does it scale to megacities?
Yeah.
I think we don't really have the problem in the European context, but you've done work in Moscow, I guess, which is a pretty gigantic city.
I have an example from Mexico.
We also have done work with Mexico City and Rio and Maringá, a few more cities in Brazil. We also have worked with Lagos. Lagos is one of our most successful cases, and we're talking about a very highly complex city. You know, it also comes from government. So, for example, the city of Lagos, we had a program, the LLGA Living Labs Award. They participated every year, and they published challenges that most people will not associate with Lagos. You know, wireless, standalone wireless hotspots, off-grid energy production, how to reduce video piracy. So this is a government opening up problems that really have an impact on their society. And when we're talking about impacting their society, we're talking about millions and millions. So there are ways, and I think they are scalable. And our work has shown us that they are definitely scalable in this context.
There's one good example, I think, also from the World Bank for the unplanned areas of the cities. It's been tested in Kibera in Nairobi and in Tandale Alua region in Dar es Salaam, for example. That's mapping the city, and that's basically a process where you combine open street maps and then you empower the community living in an unplanned area with smartphones to make the map of the city. Because when you have a map, you can start to plan. And that's something which Google can't do. I mean, they can't go to Kibera and map where the toilets are, but people can. So, and it works now, but they do it like systematically in unplanned areas because it really works and it empowers the community to care about the surroundings. So, and that's totally community driven because there's nothing else there but the community.
Okay. Okay, one more question, Chris.
Hello, this is a question for Carina about Citymart and the idea of shared problems that cities have so they can see that they're not actually as unique as they like to think they are. Could you tell us a little bit about how much the cities end up sharing or learning from each other's challenges when they do come to you and say, hey, we've got this problem, can you help us sort out a public tender? Because we'd like people coming to it, because it sounds like your organization is in a really, really good place to say, see this problem you have, it's not a million miles away from this problem here, and that could be shared on a really, really open fashion for people to realize this.
I think our platform website is a good example. When we start out in 2012, when we our beta website, 2011, 2012, we built it around the showcases. So showcase was a description of the solution a company had, because we thought what cities want to know is the solutions that are out there and solutions that have been implemented in other cities. So that was our assumption. And today we were thinking of rebuild it completely, because we realized that cities, they don't want to know about the solutions. They actually, the solution is very important, but the first thing they ask us is, what are the challenges other cities are facing? How they have solved that challenge? What is the outcome? So they actually want to know what other cities are doing. So when cities work with us, one of the benefits they gain is the sharing the same standards and the same knowledge of the other 52 cities. So that's the added value we bring to them. And we also try to organize events every year where we bring our community of cities and we do knowledge exchange sessions for them, and they find them extremely valuable. So cities are interested in understanding how other cities solve the same challenges they face. You are welcome.
Okay. If we don't have any more questions, I think we're on time, and we can wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for being on the panel, and thank you all for attending. Thanks.